Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we'll be able to live react to PMQs because I am live at a very ungodly hour of midday. Right. That's probably why I won't have my camera on. I have literally just gone out of bed because I am somebody whose sleeping pattern extends from 5 PM to midday, because that's just the life of the streamer. And you may be jealous of the fact that I get to sleep in every day. And all I can say is, well, fair enough. I don't have a real job. How are we doing? We'll make the work lunchtime break nicer. Well, good to hear it from Million Mage. We're just waiting for Sir Keith himself to take the stage, which should be the next person up. Just gotta wait for, for Lindsay Hoyle to talk about the sign language interpreter, and there we are. A true gamer, absolutely. The most oppressed minority. Aha, we have a Lindsay Hoyle.
I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House sub judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial or lead to it being abandoned. I know it can be frustrating when we can see reports in the media of the matters that we are not free to discuss here. But that arises from Parliament's constitutional relationship with the courts. More importantly, at the heart of this case are 3 young girls. We all want to see justice done for them and for their families, and for others injured in and affected by this appalling incident. Speculation about the cases, including comments made in this House, could seriously risk prejudicing proceedings. I know that none of us would ever wish to do that. Therefore, it would be wrong of me to exercise a waiver in this case, and members should not refer to it or risk prejudicing this case. Of course, I understand that members have legitimate questions about the circumstances surrounding this case. There will be no doubt wanting ministers to commit that they will come to the House and answer those questions once the legal proceedings are concluded. I give my assurance that I will ensure there are ample opportunities to do so. My understanding is that this trial is expected to start in January, and if members have questions about the operation and the decision on sub judice's resolution, they can speak to the clerks and the Speaker's Council. In the meantime, our thoughts are with the family and friends of Bibi, Elsie and Alice, and all of those.
According to a Reeve spokesperson, the era of rabbits is over, so take a shot every time there's a rabbit. It's all very confusing. Why are we talking about rabbits? It seems very strange.
But he has spoken at this dispatch box as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and after today, we all look forward to his continued contributions from the backbenches. We wish him and his family well in the future endeavours. And I say personally, thank you for a working relationship. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I call Katrina Murray.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish everyone celebrating in the UK and around the world a joyful Diwali, a time to come together.
Exactly, yeah, like he's going to contribute from the backbenches and not indeed stand down at the local elections in May and then go and make use of his green card.
Together to celebrate and focus on a brighter future. Last Diwali, the leader of the opposition and his family lit the deers outside 10 Downing Street. It was a significant moment in our national story. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a reminder that this is a country where people of every background can fulfil their dreams, and it makes us all proud to be British. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, as you've just referenced, as this is our last exchange across the dispatch boxes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his service. Now, of course, we've had political disagreements, ideological differences, we've argued at some length, but I want to thank him for his hard work, for his commitment, and for his decency in everything that he has done.
Oh yeah, his commitment. Yeah, his real commitment to British Parliament, which we'll definitely see when he leaves the country to go and make use of the fact that he has a green card. Did he think that he put in commitment there deliberately to poke a fun at him that he's definitely going to stand down from his seat and move back to America?
And I too wish him and his family the very best for whatever the future may hold for them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by the Prime Minister. Cumbernauld, in my constituency, was promised an elective and diagnostic treatment centre by the Scottish Government in 2021. This has continued to be delayed and is now alleged to be mothballed. What assurances can the Prime Minister give me that any consequentials from today's budget are used to benefit my constituents and not be held on to by the Scottish Government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. I'm sorry to hear about the delays affecting her constituents. The party opposite oversaw years.
If he does stand down and move to America, I hope it's the blow to the Tories that it should be and shows how little they care. Well, what's really going to happen with that is it's going to leave a by-election open, which Reform UK will win, which is the last thing the Tories want. If Reform UK can trample on their supposed a plan to try and move people on. And then on top of that, it also leads to Reform UK be able to park the tanks on their lawn in that area of the country that they haven't done so for.
Years of mismanagement and chaos, and the impact on Scottish NHS is evident. This Labour government is committed to delivering for the Scottish people, including making sure that we have an NHS fit for the future. And the Chancellor will set out details in just a few moments.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your kind words, and indeed thank you to the Prime Minister for his kind words. Indeed, no Prime Minister looks forward to PMQs, but I always did like this pre-budget one, because it was, for a change, nice not to be the main event and just the warm-up act. But as you said, Mr. Speaker, today is my last appearance at PMQ.
Reform didn't do that well in Rishi's seat, though. I know, but that was pre-election, right? Post-election, when everyone knows how dead the Tories are, I think they'll be different.
And I'm happy to confirm reports that I will now be spending more time in the greatest place on earth, where the scenery is worthy. The scenery is indeed worthy of a movie set, and everyone is a character. That's right, Mr. Speaker. If anyone needs me, I will be in Yorkshire. So, and as an adopted Yorkshireman, I'm particularly looking forward to doing the coast-to-coast walk that runs through my constituency and many others. Since 2015, we've made significant progress with a campaign to make it a national trail, and indeed, Natural England are close to concluding their work. So, can I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that the coast-to-coast does indeed become Britain's greatest national trail, and in preparation for my return to the backbenches, would he meet with me to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, I thought he was about to ask me to join him on the wall.
Thank you, SquareLep91, for the subscription. I appreciate you joining the New Justice stream today. I see Rishi Sunak is taking PMQs as seriously as always.
The Prime Minister. I know he's, I know he's partial to the Lake District, but perhaps we can tempt him over to our end as well. Now, Yorkshire is not just famous for its walks, but also for being home to some of England's greatest cricketers. Now, sadly, no one's going to put me on that list, Mr. Speaker, but who knows? I've got a lot more time to practice now. So, but cricket does have the power to bring people together from all communities and give them fantastic opportunities, as shown so powerfully by Andrew Flintoff's recent documentary. Now, we also lead the world in female participation, and that will stand us in good stead when we host the Women's World Cup in 2026 and when cricket becomes an Olympic sport in 2028. So could I therefore ask the Prime Minister to continue government support
Olympic sport cricket. Wow, I can't believe I think that Rishi Sunak's asking about the really important things finally.
For the England and Wales Cricket Board's new initiative to get cricket into vastly more state schools, fostering a whole new generation of cricketers for us all to cheer on at every level.
Yes, is the answer to that question. And the point is a really important one. We celebrate cricket, it does bring communities together, but it's also really important for children and young people to enjoy sport, lots of different sports, because it gives them a confidence that they might not otherwise have. It gives them the ability to work in a team and teaches them about skills like leadership. So I'm fully supportive.
Now, our two predecessors, Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague, have repeatedly come together and powerfully argued in their joint reports that it is vital for the future prosperity of Britain's economy, society and public services for us to be a world leader in technology and innovation. Now, the Prime Minister and I may not yet be at our joint report writing stage yet, but in a similar spirit of cross-party agreement, could I ask him to find his inner tech bro and continue to support emerging British tech businesses and establish our country as the home of AI growth and innovation?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and this is a really important point.
Please no. Please can we not just become like a fucking AI hub with Mississippi attached? That'd be really bad if that happened. Yeah, and exactly. Like, if we really wanted proper like resources for sports to be able to bring communities together and you use for disadvantaged backgrounds, then why aren't we fucking putting money into the education department? Why is it that we have this massive disparity between state and private education on who has access to sports facilities? Because the sports facilities in the state sector have been absolutely stripped back by all of this fucking Tory austerity.
The Leader of the Opposition held a summit last year on AI, which was very important. We have been bringing together the leaders in...
True, he should have said tech brother. He should have said tech brother, not tech bro, just to take the piss.
AI, we have a huge advantage in this country, being ranked in the top 3 in the world. AI is going to have huge potential for our growth, for our public services, and I think the whole House should be fully supportive of this.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has the immense privilege. The Prime Minister has the immense privilege of being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is a special part of our union, but one that needs particular care, attention and respect. Having a strong functioning assembly at Stormont is good for the people of Northern Ireland and good for our union. And that's why I was so pleased to see government restored there earlier this year, and I'm grateful to him for his support with that. So can he assure the House that he will continue to work to keep Stormont open, delivering for the Northern Irish people and strengthening Northern Ireland's place in our union?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and again, this is a really important point and one that matters to me personally. I worked for 5 years in Northern Ireland on some of the proposals under the Good Friday Agreement, in particular the transformation of the RUC into the police service of Northern Ireland. I worked with both communities there. It was for 5 years. It was very important to me, had a huge impact on me, and so I care deeply about Northern Ireland, and I absolutely agree that the institutions government needs to be up and running and want to give all support I can to the further development in Northern Ireland.
Now, as Prime Minister...
Why all the softball questions? Why all this? I mean, it seems really weird. Is it just softball questions because it's his last PMQs and he doesn't give a shit, right? Is that why? Is that why it's softball questions? He just, oh, I'm fucking off now. Who gives a shit? Or is it tradition or something? Some weird tradition. He's supposed to do softball questions on before the budget.
He will be acutely aware of the threats that our United Kingdom faces from an axis of authoritarian states, Iran, North Korea, Russia and China. And in particular, I'm proud of the way that this House has united in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I know that we will never waver in our commitment to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I will always be grateful for the support that he gave me when we were the first country to send Ukraine Western battle tanks, long-range missiles, and the first to offer security assurances to Kyiv. So in light of the threats that we face, can I urge him to always maintain the...
Last day of time, it literally feels like the Rishi Sunak's just like got the video machine out and started playing played VHSs.
Strength of the transatlantic alliance and ensure that NATO remains the bedrock of Western security, with the United Kingdom playing a leading role.
Yes, and NATO is, in my view, as important today as the day in which it was created, in light of the challenges that we face. And it was a Labour government that was the proud co-founder of NATO, and we've repeatedly said we support NATO to the hilt.
Rishi Sunak.
Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Diwali. And I became leader of my party during Diwali, and I now stand down during that same festival. So I'm proud to have been the first British Asian Prime Minister, but I was even prouder that it was not that big a deal. And that speaks volumes about the values of the British people, of our country, and of this Parliament. So will the Prime Minister join me in applauding the kindness, decency and tolerance that has always been the British way?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and I meant what I said.
Oh, yeah, but tolerance for asylum seekers, clearly not Rishi. You're standing on the podium, which then had the phrase that was being used by people who were trying to burn down asylum seeker hotels, right? Yeah, real tolerance that you fostered when you were Prime Minister, Rishi. Really tolerant, wasn't it?
When I said that we were all proud to see him standing there as Prime Minister, representing our diverse country. We were all proud. I think everybody in this House was. So I thank him for that. And his last question, final question as Leader of the Opposition, although judging by the speed with which his party goes through leaders, he may be back here before too long. But in the meantime, I'm sure he'll be a great champion for the people of Richmond. But, Mr. Speaker, finally, I'm sure he won't mind me disclosing to the House.
Oh, you know full well, Sockdem George, you know full well that Rishi is going to get the Theresa May treatment, right? You know full well everyone's going to be, oh, well, he wasn't as bad as like Liz Truss and Boris. And I'm like, no, he was worse than both, right? Like, Liz Truss spent 40 days, so like, how can Rishi's 2 years be worse than a couple of days that she spent as Prime Minister? And at least Boris Johnson wanted to fund things, whereas Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt just stripped away more funding for everything.
The contents of a letter that he wrote to me this week. My answer to it is clear. Yes, I will arrange for him to meet the relevant minister about the A66 that runs through his constituency.
Dame Beghillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Hackney, nearly 4,000 children who could fill 8 primary schools are in temporary accommodation, many outside London. This is bad for their future opportunities. It's ripping apart our communities. I welcome the government's pledge to build new homes, but will he ensure that those who cannot have a roof over their head are a top priority in that long queue for new housing?
Prime Minister.
I thank you for raising this issue. It is a source of national shame that there are just under 1.3 million households on a social housing waiting list, including, I think, 8,000 of them in Hackney. The best way to tackle overcrowding and meet housing need is to build the homes this country needs, and that's why we will deliver the 1.5 million homes over this Parliament, and the Chancellor will set out further details in just a moment.
What's the over or under, chat, that plan doesn't include any state funding for council housing? What do we reckon? What do we reckon is the chances that we're actually going to get loads of funding for social housing in the budget, and it's not just going to be let's deregulate the planning sector and then just fingers crossed, inshallah? Because that'd be frustrating if, you know, there was a big social housing waiting list because we've not built enough social houses, or the fact that we'd sold them off and we're not ending right to buy, and then they didn't have any plans to A, deal with right to buy, and B, actually build any council houses.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with your remarks and the remarks of the Prime Minister about the right on...
Steve Swinson said 500 million for council housing. Well, that is a shock. But that's good, though. That's true. That's good. It's not much, but it's a start.
The member for Richmond and Northallerton, and thank him for his service, and wish him and the whole country a happy Diwali. Despite our political differences, I've always felt a certain kinship since the general election, when he was the only other party leader to get as wet as I did. I'm looking forward to debating the budgets with him and the Chancellor.
Yeah, we'll keep utilising rent-to-rent emergency accommodation for as long as we need. I'm still reeling, right? Still reeling from that girl we watched yesterday.
Shortly, but can I wish him and his family all the best for the future? Mr. Speaker, next month's summit in Baku is a chance for the UK to regain world leadership on climate change, a role disastrously lost under the Conservatives. As this is the final summit before countries must ratchet up their new Paris agreements.
Yeah, so that's 1/3. So if it's 500 million builds 5,000 social homes, right? If we get 5,000 council houses, that is 1/3,000th of the total number they say they're going to build over the course of the Parliament.
Before 2035, will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to seize back world leadership on climate change by committing today to support the targets set out this week by the Independent Climate Change Committee and publish a programme to deliver on those?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will seize that initiative. We've reset on the international stage, and climate is one of the biggest challenges that we face. I will be going to the conference this year, as I went, in fact, last year, as leader of the opposition, to continue those discussions about how we reach the very important targets that we must reach.
Shred David.
I think Prime Minister, for his reply, I hope we can really take that world leadership back again. Another issue which the UK needs to show urgent leadership on is the escalating war in Sudan. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. 11 million Sudanese have had to flee from their homes, Mr. Speaker. The reports of mass killings and horrifying sexual violence against women are truly stomach-churning. So when the UK takes over presidency of the UN Security Council this Friday, will the Prime Minister make it a priority to secure a new resolution on preventing future atrocities, including a no-fly zone to stop the Iranian drones?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this because it is an important issue, and I don't think we discuss it enough in this House. We continue to see mounting evidence of appalling atrocities against civilians.
Yeah, I was reading that as well, Cardigan note. It looks like the consequences of climate change are going to be pretty fucking disastrous. I mean, look at Valencia today. Look at Valencia today. They had like a gigantic flash flood. It's killed 50 people already.
And unacceptable restrictions on humanitarian access, and working with international partners, including as penholder, as he knows, at the UN Security Council to end the violence, secure humanitarian access and ensure the protection of civilians is a major priority.
Rachel Battle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is this Labour government in setting up a child poverty task force which is determined to move 4.3 million children in poverty today into a better future. However, we also inherited 2.1 million older people in poverty. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree to setting up a pensioner poverty task force so that older people don't have to worry...
Right. Even the SCG are going all fucking quangos and inshallah. Fucking hell.
...about paying for their housing, food and heating costs and ensure that they have dignity in later life?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the scale of poverty that we inherited in this country is truly appalling, with over 4 million children now growing up in low-income families. We'll deliver on a manifesto commitment to tackle child poverty, as we did last time in government, and we'll publish our strategy in the spring.
Yes, once the whole quango has met, right? Rather than, as Ben says in chat correctly, giving people more money.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ICJ has mandated that Israel ensures access to life-saving aid in Gaza under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, yet the Israeli government has voted to effectively block its delivery. As a human rights lawyer, does the Prime Minister agree that banning UNRWA is a breach of international law? And how much more evidence does he need before calling out what is happening as a genocide and acting in line with the UK's responsibilities as a signatory of the Genocide Convention?
Based and human rights pilled. Literally calling him out as a human rights lawyer was perfect from Carla. I love that. And again, what is really important is that the provisional measures that were set up under the Genocide Convention that were passed down to Israel, right? So, because they haven't adjudicated whether it's a genocide or not at the ICJ yet, but they have handed down some provisional measures, and there was specifically that the head judge said there was a plausible right for the Palestinians to be protected from genocide. It was a really wordy statement. But anyway, what they did do is hand down provisional measures to prevent it. And one of those provisional measures was to stop the blocking of aid going into Gaza and opening all crossings available to deliver aid into Gaza. Of course, they closed the Eretz crossing. They have kept blocking aid going into the country. We know this. This was why Elon Levy was removed from his position, because he kept saying that they weren't blocking aid when they were. And then on top of that, they are now restricting access to UNRWA into Gaza to deliver aid as well, which of course is also in contrary to those provisional measures handed down by the ICJ to plausibly protect the Palestinians from genocide, on top of the fact that all of the people who go, oh, well, hang on a minute, but Gaza hasn't been occupied since 2005, since the unilateral disengagement plan under Ariel Sharon, which of course isn't actually unilateral disengagement, it was just removal of the settlements. They still occupy them under international law. Like, how on earth would somebody block an entire ass charity from having access to Gaza unless they were the belligerent occupiers of that territory? Doesn't make any fucking sense. Good question, though.
I'm very worried and concerned about the decision that's just been taken by the Parliament in relation to UNRWA. There's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and that decision will only make it much worse, which is why I've expressed my concern about it already before today and will continue to do so. It needs to be reversed. It needs to be reversed very, very quickly indeed.
What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Saying your concerns isn't geopolitical pressure. We're the 6th biggest economy in the world. We're one of Israel's longest-term allies internationally. Not that I like that we are, but we are, right? They rely on us for international geopolitical support. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to force their hand? It's clear that the John McDonnell strategy...
Fucking neoliberalism.
...of writing strongly worded letters does not, in any way, actually move the dial on whether or not Netanyahu and the Knesset change policy, whether they change direction. There is literally no amount of strongly worded letters that will make them change these positions, because they only act on a show of force. They only respond to material incentives. It's clear, given how many strongly worded letters have been written to Israel, how many judgments have been handed down by the ICJ. No amount of weasel words and empty condemnations will get Israel to change its position. You have to take material action. That means sanctions. That means a total arms embargo. That means materially affecting, quote-unquote, Israel's ability to defend herself, as Keir Starmer would say. You can't just do, as Clupid points out in chat, concern and inshallah. You have to take material action. Material action is how you fix this problem and how you get Israel to change course, not faux concern.
I have never described what's going on in Gaza as genocide. I do agree that all sides should comply with international law.
Melanie Ward.
What will you do if they don't comply with international law? Again, right? If you stand next to someone committing a crime and instead of intervening to stop the crime, you just stand there going, oh, isn't it bad how many crimes they're doing? Or even less than that. You just stand there next to somebody saying crime, going, I believe that crime is bad and nobody should commit crimes. Then what the fuck are you doing? Well, literally, what the fuck are you doing? If all you're doing is just standing there going, well, they're not doing any crimes, really, are they? Or crime is bad. Lol. No, you intervene. You stop it. You call the police at the very least. And at one point, they were considering not even doing that by intervening at the ICJ. And then on top of that, you're giving them the weapons to commit more crimes. Literally, his Hans Blix from Team America will be very angry and will write you a letter telling you how angry we are. He did say that he'd never said that it's a genocide. I think I understand why they'd say this. You know, they want to wait until there's an ICJ ruling on this. But, of course, the real problem is that they won't even call out the war crimes when they happen. They won't even call out the war crimes that are obvious. The war crimes that have been discussed widely as being war crimes, right? There is some discussion over whether it constitutes genocide. Like, I'm going to go with the Brookings Institution's Middle East Barometer, which shows it roughly equal in terms of scholarly opinion on it being genocide or war crimes akin to genocide, right? That's what the Brookings Institution, which isn't like leftism.marxism Lenin Lava 69 on Twitter. The Brookings Institution is a centrist geopolitics think tank. It's a centrist institution that speaks to lots of different scholars from different areas about what they perceive to be the actions of Israel in Gaza. And the Middle East Barometer has an equal opinion between genocide and war crimes akin to genocide, right? So even if you're calling it the lesser of those two, which is war crimes akin to genocide, that's still not been called out by Keir Starmer. He just goes, well, war crimes are bad, international law should be followed, yet won't even say specifically when war crimes and international law breaches have been committed. It's pathetic, it's spineless, it's totally spineless. And how on earth can we call ourselves somebody who is committed to the rule of law as a country? You know, all these people who talk about law and order, and yet he won't even call out or take material action to stop war crimes from being committed. Exactly, the Lemkin Institute has said stronger things too. Then just go with lethal ethnic cleansing or plausible genocide. Exactly, you know, if it isn't ethnic cleansing, which clearly it is, the whole plan of what's happening in North Gaza is an ethnic cleansing campaign. Oh, it's forced transfer, that's part of the Genocide Convention. But even if you don't want to use that word, ethnic cleansing and war crimes, breaches of international law, you can easily call these things out. You can easily condemn and take material action, right? Condemnation is the baseline for what we should have here. Condemnation is the baseline. The baseline. We should be doing far more than condemnation and taking material action to try and prevent it. But even the basic, the most mealy-mouthed and little commitment reaction you could have, which is to just say, oh, well, I condemn it. Too difficult for Sir Keir. Too difficult for Sir Keith Stonga. Too difficult for Sir Keir Starmer, Sir War Crimer, Sir Queer Harmer, Sir Keith to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, a Scottish Government Health Minister was forced to apologise for waiting times in my area of Fife, where some patients wait more than 2 years for treatment. My constituents deserve so much better than this. Does the Prime Minister agree that the SNP must take responsibility for 17 years of failure? And if today's budget delivers a bigger block grant to Scotland, they must sort out the mess they have made of Scotland's precious NHS.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the second time this has come up this afternoon in Prime Minister's questions. I hope the SNP are listening good and hard, because I'm sorry to hear her constituents have been waiting so many years for their medical treatment that they need. We are committed to the NHS, and the Chancellor will have a lot more to say about that in just a moment.
They really have arranged a ton of attacks on the SNP today, haven't they? Well, yeah, of course they have, yeah. They realise it's the place where their support is slipping the most.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall-Casey, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minutes from here, in the communities of Victoria, Pimlico, Paddington and Covent Garden, there is an unprecedented rise in the number of people sleeping rough after 14 years of the Tory government. Will the Prime Minister update this House on the cross-departmental homelessness strategy? And does he agree with me that this Labour government has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to end rough sleeping for good?
Prime Minister.
Homelessness levels are far too high.
Yeah, we'll skip up to the budget when it gets there.
In this country. And we are developing a long-term strategy, working with mayors and local leaders to end homelessness once and for all. And taking action to tackle the root causes, Mr. Speaker, which is delivering the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. And we, of course, have picked up where the party opposite failed by abolishing no-fault evictions, preventing many renters ending up homeless.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, we had the embarrassment of the Labour Party being sued by the Trump campaign. Then we had the national capitulation of...
Let me hear the rest of the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then we had the national capitulation of the government over the sovereignty of the Chagos Island.
Oh no, we followed an ICJ ruling. Oh, can't believe they're making me defend Keir Starmer here. There was an ICJ ruling on the Chagos Islands. And of course, you know, the Trump campaign.
Buckle up, folks.
Why do we give a shit what fucking Donald Trump thinks about anything? Why the fuck should we care about Donald Trump's opinions on literally anything? Who gives a shit, right?
Now we have had the personal humiliation of the Prime Minister at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit. All of which begs the question, Mr. Speaker, how on earth does the Foreign Secretary still have the full confidence of the Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker,
because he won't call it a genocide either.
I was intending to say that he was an upgrade on his predecessor. Who, of course, drove up thousands of pounds in mortgages, but I withdraw that now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister and the Chancellor discuss the importance of supporting working families, I think of the dedicated farmers in South Norfolk. The Prime Minister has constantly acknowledged the critical role of food security and the need for farmers to have certainty to plan. Can the Prime Minister confirm what action our government will be taking to back British farming in constituencies like mine?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to his place. Talking of...
Wow, Leopard, thank you for the 50 gifted. I'm going to turn off notifications right now because that's 50 gifted, and so that will be a lot of notifications. But thank you very much for the support. Remember, this is the last day, apart from tomorrow, that you can get in your gift-arinos and your subscriptions and your money to help support the streams so I can get paid out in November. I think this puts me about 150 quid or something behind my target income for October. So if you can toss a coin to the streamer, if you can do such a thing, that would be very much appreciated, as it's what keeps me able to stream 6 days a week. We can now skip ahead as Mel and Kat has started.
We, collectively, we should all remember to respect the Chair, respect our colleagues, and to respect this House. Now, before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I am remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of the Leader of the Opposition or of the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Fucking neoliberalism.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On July the 4th, the country voted for change. This government was given a mandate to restore stability to our economy and to begin a decade of national renewal.
Do I have any of these things on here? I don't even know. There's not. It's not mandate for change. I've got changed Labour. Thank you for all of the money and the gifts you've just sent out. Thank you very much, everybody. Jack, your watch, and Ethan. Thank you very much for the money.
To fix the foundations and deliver...
There we go. Fix the foundations. Immediately got my free space.
Change. Through responsible leadership in the national interest. That is our task. And I know that we can achieve it. My belief in Britain burns brighter than ever. And the prize on offer is immense. As my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said on Monday, change must be felt. More pounds in people's pockets. An NHS that is there when you need it. An economy that is growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all. Because
right, I've got to keep checking these things. Nope, nothing yet.
That is the only way to improve living standards. And the only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest.
Immediately. There you go.
There are no shortcuts. And to deliver that investment, We must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years.
14 years of Tory government. There might be turn the page on here as well. I've not seen all of the squares. This is Ben Sharp in chat. Thank you very much. Mashallah, for the bingo card. So I'm going to be checking this a lot.
This is not the first time that it has fallen to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again. And while this is the first budget in more than 14 years to be delivered by a Labour Chancellor, it is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman.
More female-led austerity. Let's go.
I am deeply proud to be Britain's first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. To girls and young women everywhere, I say, let there be no ceiling on your ambition, your hopes and your dreams. And along with the pride that I feel standing here today, there is also a responsibility to pass on a fairer society and a stronger generation to the next generation of women. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite failed our country. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages.
Any mention of Liz Truss crashing the economy in the mini-budget, you can tick that off.
The British people have inherited their failure. A black hole in the public finances.
There you go, black hole, £22 billion black hole. Again, I've not got it on mine, but you might have it on yours.
Public services on their knees. A decade of low growth and the worst parliament on record for living standards. Let me begin with the public finances. In July, I exposed a £22 billion black hole at the heart of the previous government's plans. A series of promises that they made but had no money to deliver. Covered up from the British people, covered up from this House. The Treasury's reserve, set aside for genuine emergencies, spent 3 times over, just 3 months into the financial year. Today, on top of the detailed document that I have provided to the House in July, the government is publishing a line-by-line breakdown of the £22 billion black hole that we inherited.
So it's going to include all of the money that you spent correctly, as I say, increasing salaries for people in the public sector, like the public sector wage demands. But if you're doing it line by line, you're going to basically have to admit that that was a political choice that you made. A good choice, but a choice nonetheless.
It shows hundreds of unfunded pressures on the public finances this year and into the future too. The Office for Budget Responsibility have published their own review of the circumstances around the spring budget forecast. They say that the previous government, and I quote, did not provide the OBR with all the information to them. And had they known about these undisclosed pressures that have since come to light, then their spring budget forecast for spending would have been, and I quote again, materially different. Let me be clear. That means any comparison between today's forecast and the OBR's March forecast is false, because the party opposite hid the reality of their public spending plans. Yet, at the very same budget, they made another £10 billion worth of cuts to national insurance. It was the height of irresponsibility, and they knew it, because they had run out of road and they called...
I mean, everything she's saying here is right. I hate to break it to people in chat. She is right that they did hide about 10 billion of this, which was, again, what she was saying was stuff that was going to have to come out of the Treasury Reserve. Again, spent on asylum hotels and like a Home Office overspend and shit like that. But, you know, for them to say it's like not true, but no, it absolutely is true. Absolutely is true what she's saying here. But, you know, You can't just keep saying the last government was shit. We all know the last government was shit. What are you going to do?
An election to avoid making difficult choices. So let me make this promise to the British people. Never again will we allow a government to play fast and loose with our public finances. And never again will we allow a government to hide the true state of our public finances from our independent forecaster. That's why today I can confirm that we will implement in full the 10 recommendations from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibilities Review.
So why did Labour support the national insurance cut? A very good question, Richie. A very good question. Except everyone knew of the hole during the election. It's worth pointing out, Enthers, that the budgetary overspend in places like the Home Office and inside an asylum system, those holes, that hole in the nation's finances that she's talking about here, the 10 billion overspend or whatever it is, that is a different black hole to the £18 billion of cuts in unprotected departments that was identified by the IFS, right? So when they're saying £22 billion fiscal black hole, and the IFS is saying an £18 billion cuts in unprotected departments and the conspiracy of silence, right? These are two separate things. So actually the big black hole is like £40 billion. Not that a black hole would exist, right? But if you use their parlance, if you use Treasury orthodoxy as your basis for economic discussion, there's actually £40 billion worth of a shortfall in how the nation is spending versus finances, and which would have to be picked up for by a structural deficit.
The country has inherited not just broken public finances, but broken public services too. The British people can see and they can feel that in their everyday lives. NHS waiting lists at record levels. Children in porter cabins as school roofs crumble. Trains that do not arrive, rivers filled with polluted waste, prisons overflowing, crimes which are not investigated, and criminals who are not punished. That is the country's inheritance from the party opposite. But they had no plan to improve our public services. And they had no plan.
I must say, this is a pretty good dressing down of the Tories here. Again, but like, what are you going to do? Okay, we know the last government was shit. I mean, she's absolutely right to eviscerate these people for the disgusting state they've left the country in. But, you know, if we're going to be allowing BlackRock to be the people who fix it, then we're just creating a mess for ourselves 15 years down the line.
To put our public finances on a stable footing. Quite the opposite. Since 2021, there have been no detailed plans for departmental spending set out beyond this year. And their plans relied on a baseline for spending this year, which we now know was wrong, because it did not take into account the £22 billion black hole. The previous government also failed to budget for costs that they knew would materialise.
Yeah, and again, it's just like you, as you say, Fat Baptist, like all the contract, like these, like we're still paying down a bunch of PFI debt, and that's the legacy of quote unquote the last Labour government.
This includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if this was coming from John McDonnell, right? You could really be a position to jump off of to try and change the face of economic discussion in this country.
Of two terrible injustices.
Thank you, Vermilion Mage, for the 100 bits. It's payday. Cheers from this working person for my brilliant commentary as ever. Well, I do appreciate the kind words of support.
I just mentioned respecting colleagues. The public are watching. They want to hear what the Chancellor has to say. Simmer down.
I would politely suggest that honourable members listen to this, because it includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices: the infected blood scandal and the Post Office Horizon scandal. The Leader of the Opposition rightly made an unequivocal apology for the injustice of the infected blood scandal on behalf of the British state, but he did not budget for the costs of compensation. Today, for the very first time, we will provide specific funding to compensate those infected.
Thank you, Gumball, for the Prime sub.
And those affected in full. Yeah. With £11.8 billion in this budget. And I am also today setting aside £1.8 billion to compensate victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal. Yeah. Redress that is long overdue for the pain and injustice that they have suffered. Madam Deputy Speaker, the leadership campaign for the party opposite has now been going on for over 3 months. But in all that time, not one single apology for what they did to our country.
And this is a good line as well, right? You got to, if you want to attack Badenoch and Jenrick, you've got to attack them on the fact that they are also just not talking about the economy, because literally it's what lost them the fucking election. I know I bang on about it, but I want to just get it into people's heads, right? And the Tories still do not understand. They still refuse. They refuse to understand the state of the economy, the state of public services, the state of the NHS, the state of our schools, the state of the justice system, the state of the roads, the state of all of our civic infrastructure, right? All of these things is the reason why they lost the election. Pure and simple, it's the state of the economy that lost them the election. And they refuse to admit it. So it's worth pointing out on every single time the Tory bellends like Badenoch and Jenrick rear their ugly heads, right? The single thing that you should be doing in response to saying, you don't care, you live in a different world, all you do is care about cultural bullshit like immigration, trans people, and whether or not we have diversity managers in the NHS, and you refuse to answer the basic question, which is the state of the economy.
Because the Conservative Party has not changed. But this is a changed Labour Party, and we will restore
Changed Labour, there you go.
stability to our country once again. The scale and seriousness of the situation that we have inherited cannot be underestimated. Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion. Any Chancellor standing here today would have to face this reality. And any responsible Chancellor would take action. That is why today I am restoring stability to our public finances and rebuilding our public services. As a former economist at the Bank of England, I know what it means to respect.
Somebody said in chat that it's like the £40 billion tax increase is the biggest initial tax increase in any first budget ever, which quite frankly is more than I expected. But when all of this is basically just to cover no manifesto pledges, but just departmental underspends or departmental overspends and keeping public spending on the same footing that it was previously rather than increasing public spending. You know, it's not even that much in terms of actually increasing the overall public realm that we need to get it not just on par, but you know, with where they were previously, but in the same state as they should be in other countries like on the continent. Like, it's a lot in terms of an individual budget for increasing tax, but in terms of how much we actually need to be able to properly revamp our public sector, to, you know, not just how it was in 2010 when it was propped up by PFI contracts, but to make sure that it's quote-unquote fit for the long term, it's going to take more than that, isn't it? And these are just, like, intermediate taxes, not actually, like, taxes on the rich, like the wealth taxes that we really need.
Respect our economic institutions. I want to put on record my thanks to the Governor of the Bank, Andrew Bailey, and to the Independent Monetary Policy Committee. Today, I can confirm that we will maintain the MPC's target of 2% inflation, as measured by the 12-month increase in the Consumer Prices Index. I want to thank James Bowler, the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, and my team of officials. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to thank my predecessors as Chancellor of the Exchequer for their wise counsel as I have prepared for this budget. In particular, I would like to thank the former Right Honourable Member for...
I think Set the Shallow points it out well in chat, right? As an initial budget, it seems radical as a £40 billion tax increase, right? Because it's so high in comparison to other ones. But what it actually does show us really is how radical Cameron and Osborne were in how much they cut and how much is required to be able to undo that damage to get us back to a baseline, let alone, you know, actually increase the level of the public realm to make it have an actual fairer society rather than a society that's just kind of barely getting by and just having public services that are normal or not even just below normal for European standards.
For Spelthorne, for his invaluable advice in this weekend's papers, where he concluded that his mini-budget, and I quote, wasn't perfect. Well, for once, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think him and I are in absolute agreement. Finally, I want to thank Richard Hughes and his team at the Office for Budget Responsibility for their work in preparing today's economic and fiscal outlook. Let me now take the House through that forecast. The cost of living crisis under the last government stretched household finances to their limit, with inflation hitting a peak of above 11%. Today, the OBR say that CPI inflation will average 2.5% this year, 2.6% in 2025, then 2.3% in 2026, 2.1% in 2027, 2.1% in 2028.
I'm so glad that they're keeping the 2% target for inflation, because this means interest rates will never fucking go down. Because the Monetary Policy Committee will say, oh, well, we're projected to be above the target for inflation, so we cannot reduce interest rates. If we change the target to 3%, with these projections of inflation being lower than the target percentage for inflation, we could bring interest rates down, and that would allow for more government borrowing without interest rates rising, which would be better for everybody. Richard Murphy made this point Richard Murphy made this point specifically, and I agree with him. I do agree that we should be increasing the inflation target to allow more room for government spending. Or just get rid of the Bank of England independence tax and go, oh, well, it's just above 2%. The first number is 2. It's good enough for me. Let's bring the interest rates down.
And 2.0% in 2029. Next, I move on to economic growth. Today's budget marks an end to short-termism. So I am pleased that for the first time, the OBR have published not only 5-year growth forecasts, but a detailed assessment of the growth impacts of our policies over the next decade too. And the new Charter for Budget Responsibility.
There's literally no correlation between rates and inflation. It's failed to control inflation since its inception. I mean, I agree, right? I agree. But I think that if you went into an election, which you'd have to do, if you wanted to get rid of Bank of England independence, it would have to be a manifesto pledge. You couldn't do that mid-term. You'd have to run on it in your manifesto. And that would lead to huge amounts of kind of electoral pushback, I think. People would accuse you of being quote-unquote irresponsible. You'd have to change the rhetoric first to be able to lay the foundations, to be able to do that. You can have to run on it for an election. So they're kind of stuck with Bank of England independence, so they would have to kind of change it by changing the numbers. But of course, the whole myth-making of this is indeed that interest rates control inflation, which they don't, of course. Fiscal policy controls inflation, and usually exogenous effects, right? But you'd have to change all of the rhetoric by being in government for a certain amount of time, and then after that time using the new zeitgeist to be able to run on a policy platform in the next election. That's how long you'd have to take to be able to rhetorically prime the country to get rid of Bank of England independence and undo the myth-making of inflation being controlled by interest rates.
Which I am publishing today confirms that this will become a permanent feature of our framework. The OBR forecast that real GDP growth will be 1.1% in 2024, 2.0% in 2025, 1.8% in 2026, 1.5% in 2027, 1.5% in 2028, and 1.6% in 2029. And the OBR are clear. This budget will permanently increase the supply capacity of the economy, boosting long-term growth.
Ooh, someone's been reading Janet Yellen.
Every budget, it might sound shocking to them, but this government is boosting long-term economic growth. Every budget that I deliver will be focused on our...
I love Laura Trott having a meltdown there. Oh, but tax rises kill economic growth. No, actually, you can have tax rises that are good for growth. There's no correlation between high taxes and low growth.
...to grow the economy. And underpinning that mission are the 7 key pillars of our growth strategy, developed and delivered alongside business, all driven forward by our excellent Financial Secretary to the Treasury. First, and most important, is to restore economic stability. That is my focus today. Second, increasing investment and building new infrastructure is vital for productivity. So we are catalysing £70 billion of investment through our National Wealth Fund. And we are transforming...
National Wealth Fund, there you go. Although, what is it? I mean, that's more than they said they were going to do with the National Wealth Fund. But again, it's just a rebranding of Tory policy, but with a change in which the funding mechanism is used.
Our planning rules to get Britain building again. Third, to ensure that all parts of the UK can realise their potential, we are working with the devolved governments and partnering with our mayors to develop local growth plans. Fourth, to improve employment prospects and skills, we are creating Skills England, delivering our plans to make work pay and tackling economic inactivity. Fifth,
No, that's not the 63. So we jock, that's not the 63 billion. The 63 billion specifically refers to how much investment they were getting from their investment summit they did. The 70 billion she's referring to is state investment through the National Wealth Fund. So two different things. Unless, of course, it's the 63 billion plus the 7 billion they'd already announced for the National Wealth Fund. I'll let her continue, see if it clears this up.
We are launching our long-term modern industrial strategy and
Did she say planning reform? Did I miss planning reform? I'm good at this job, aren't I?
Expanding opportunities for our small and medium-sized businesses to grow. 6. To drive innovation, we are protecting record funding for research and development to harness the full potential of the UK's science base. And finally, to maximise the growth benefits of our clean energy mission, we have confirmed key investments, such as carbon capture and storage, to create jobs in our industrial heartlands. Our approach is already having an impact. Just 2 weeks...
Yes! More SOPs for the petrochemical industry. Let's fucking go. 22 billion of white elephant.
Ago, we delivered an international investment summit, which saw businesses commit £63.5 billion of investment into our country, creating nearly 40,000 jobs across the
She never said superpower when she talks about clean energy.
United Kingdom. But we cannot undo 14 years of damage in one go. Economic growth will be our mission for the duration of this Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we set out the fiscal rules that would guide this government. I'm confirming those today. Our stability rule and our investment rule. The stability rule means that we will bring the current budget into balance so that we do not borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We will meet this rule in 2029-30.
I mean, if you've got grow the economy on your bingo cards, you should definitely have ticked it off by now.
Until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From then on, we will balance the current budget in the third year of every budget held annually each autumn. That will provide a tougher constraint on day-to-day spending.
Jesus Christ, Solly's already got bingo.
So that difficult decisions cannot be constantly delayed or deferred. The OBR say that the current budget will be in deficit by £26.2 billion in 2025-26 and £5.2 billion in 2026-27, before moving into surplus of £10.9 billion in 2027-28, £9.3 billion in 2028-29 and £9.9 billion in 2029-30.
Why the fuck are they running a surplus? Why are they running a... Jesus Christ, they took the bloody Resolution Foundation papers really to heart, didn't they?
Meeting our stability rule 2 years early. Monthly public sector finance data show that government borrowing in the first 6 months of this year was already running significantly higher than the OBR's March forecast. And so the OBR confirmed today that borrowing in this financial year is now £127 billion, reflecting the inheritance left by the party opposite. The increase in the net cash requirement in 2024-25 is lower than the increase in borrowing, at £22.3 billion higher than the spring forecast. Because of the action that...
Literally, they are doing an ALP. Oh my God, she's Jim Chalmers. That's literally who she is. She's Jim Chalmers. I bet, right? Jim Chalmers and whoever Kamala Harris's economics advisor is, and Rachel Reeves all have like a little fucking Teams call with each other.
That we are taking. Borrowing falls from 4.5% of GDP this year to 2.1% of GDP by the end of the forecast. Public sector net borrowing will be £105.6 billion.
So it is deficit reduction. It is an austerity budget if you're running on deficit reduction. You're literally doing a deficit reduction budget.
In 2025-26, £88.5 billion in 2026-27, £72.2 billion in 2027-28, £71.9 billion in 2028-29 and £70.6 billion in 2029-2030. Madam Deputy...
Exactly, as Jack points out in the super chat, I appreciate the money. Deficits are good because they're expansionary. It's expansionary fiscal policy. This is what's going to drive growth.
Speaker, before I come to tax, it is vital that we are driving efficiency and reducing wasteful spending. In July, to begin delivering and dealing with our inheritance, I made £5.5 billion of savings this year. Today, we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year, by using technology more effectively and joining up services across government. As set out in our manifesto, I will shortly be appointing our COVID Corruption Commissioner.
Yeah, efficiency savings. It's all very George Osborne, isn't it? Although I guess they would got way more tax rises this time. But like, we don't need efficiency savings. That's what failed under the Conservative administration. I say failed. It very much succeeded in doing what they wanted to do, which was to destroy the public realm. But there is no. We are already really efficient. Our public services are incredibly efficient. They are just underfunded.
They will lead our work to uncover those companies that used a national emergency to line their own pockets. Because that money belongs in our public services and taxpayers want that money back. And I can confirm today that David Goldstone has been appointed as a chair of the new Office for Value for Money to help us realise the benefits from every pound of public spending. Today, I am also taking 3 steps to ensure that welfare spending is more sustainable. First, we inherited the last government's plans to reform the work capability assessment. We will deliver those savings as part of our fundamental...
Oh my God! I mean, they've already announced this, right? I already did a big segment about how fucking Liz Kendall is an evil piece of shit. But literally just taking Tory plans on welfare spending that's already cut to the bone, specifically affecting the disabled, who already have had their plights described as a violation of their human rights by the United Nations in the UK because of welfare cuts, and then trying to fucking spin it as being like a good thing that they're doing. Fucking hate these people. Absolutely hate these people. Yeah, we knew this already, but I'm just going to get angry at it again because of the way that the way this country fucking treats disabled people is it's repugnant. It really is. On top of that, we're going to have a Quango too. So we're going to spend money on the Quango to take money away from the disabled.
Reforms to the health and disabilities benefit system that my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, will bring forward. Second, I can today announce a crackdown on fraud in our welfare system, often the work of criminal gangs. We will expand DWP's counter-fraud teams, using innovative new methods to prevent illegal activity, and provide new legal powers to crack down on fraudsters, including direct access to bank accounts to recover debt. This package saves £4.3 billion a year.
Not for pensioners, though. They're not going to be snooping on pensioners. The only benefit recipients who are going to get snooped on are those who are on disability or on JSA. Absolutely. If you receive pensions, if you receive benefits from the state pension, no snooping for you. Any pension fraudster, not that I think that there are, potentially are those, I guess, but even so, maybe don't snoop on other people's bank accounts. It's fucking dystopian shit, innit?
By the end of the forecast. Third, the government will shortly be publishing the Get Britain Working white paper, tackling the root causes of inactivity with an integrated approach across health, education and welfare.
Arbeits macht frei.
And we will provide £240 million for 16 trailblazer projects, targeted at those who are economically inactive and most at risk of being out of education, employment or training, to get people into work and to reduce the benefits bill. Before a government could consider any change to a tax rate or threshold, it must ensure that people pay what they already owe. So we will invest to modernise HMRC systems using...
Double speed is the way forward. Listen to all the BS is painful at normal speed. This is 1.25, to be fair. This is only 1.25 that we're listening at. Use the term economically inactive to talk about people is just gross. I agree, Morinarke, unless we're talking about landlords. If we're talking about landlords, then by all means, call them economically inactive if you want to. Because that's exactly what landlords are. They are economically inactive. They may have an income, but they're not doing anything.
Using the very best technology and recruit additional HMRC compliance and debt staff. We will clamp down on those umbrella companies who exploit workers, increase the interest rate on unpaid tax debt to ensure that people pay on time, and go after the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. These measures to reduce the tax gap raise £6.5 billion by the end of the forecast, and I want to thank the Exchequer Secretary for his outstanding work on this agenda.
So we are going to get austerity in the welfare department, aren't we then? So Phil's just kind of wrong, isn't he? Like, they're targeting deficit reduction and they're targeting departmental reductions in spending. So it is an austerity budget.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that for working people up and down our country, family finances are stretched and paychecks don't go as far as they once did. So today I am taking steps to support people with the cost of living. It was the Labour government that introduced the national minimum wage in 1999. It had a transformative impact on the lives of working people. As promised in our manifesto, we asked the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living for the first time. I can confirm that we will accept the Low Pay Commission recommendation to increase the national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker. And for the first time, we will move towards a single adult rate phased in over time by initially increasing the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds by 16.3% as recommended by the Low Pay Commission, taking it to £10 an hour. A Labour policy.
I mean, this is fine, I guess, but people in chat will know my overall opinion on the minimum wage, which is that it's not as good. It's not good enough. It's not as good, as sectoral bargaining, right? Seeing an increase is fine, but as our in charge at Dubé's research has pointed out, you can have a minimum wage as 80% of the median wage, and it doesn't lead to a disemployment effect, or it can go as high, as 80% of the median wage, and it doesn't lead to a disemployment effect. So there's plenty that we could be doing to ensure that we have a reasonable minimum wage, but it should just be pegged. It should just make it 75% of the median wage, and then just peg it to inflation.
Policy to protect working people being delivered by a Labour government once again. Second, I have heard representations from colleagues across this House about the carers allowance and the impact of the current policy on carers looking to increase the hours that they work, including from the honourable members for Shipley, the honourable member for Scarborough and Whitby, and the right honourable member for Kingston and Surbiton too. Carers allowance currently provides up to £81.90 per week to help those with additional caring responsibilities. Today, I can confirm that we are increasing the weekly earnings limit to the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage per week, the largest increase in care.
Doesn't Sweden have sectoral bargaining in lieu of a minimum wage? It does, yes. A lot of the Nordic countries just don't have a minimum wage at all, which is funny, right? Because loads of right-wingers will go, oh, well, we don't need a minimum wage because these countries don't have minimum wages. And I'm just like, yeah, they have something better than a minimum wage that you would also hate because it involves the government mandating that the employers are forced to bargain with trade unions.
Carers allowance since it was introduced in 1976. This means that a carer can now earn over £10,000 a year while receiving carers allowance, allowing them to increase their hours where they want to and keep more of their money. I am also concerned about the cliff edge in the current system and the issue of overpayments. My right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, has announced an independent review to look at the issue of overpayments, and we will work across this House to develop the right solutions. Third, we will provide £1 billion from next year to extend the Household Support Fund and discretionary housing payments to help those facing financial hardship with the cost of essentials. Fourth, having heard representations from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Trussell and others to reduce the level of debt repayments that could be taken from a household's universal credit payment each month by reducing it from 25% to 15% of their standard allowance. This means that 1.2 million of the poorest households will keep more of their award each month, lifting children out of poverty, and those who benefit will gain an average of £420 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker.
Well, looking forward to spending all of that £420 a year on buses, right?
Our plan to make work pay will also protect working people. I know that the party opposite are deeply interested in our plans here. Having seen their colleagues repeatedly dismissed at short notice, I know that they are worried about their future under the Right Honourable Member for North West Essex. So they should rest easy, knowing that our plan will protect working people from unfair dismissal. It will safeguard them from bullying in the workplace. And it will improve their access to paternity and maternity leave. I hope that the new Shadow Cabinet will soon be grateful for these increased protections at work. It is right that we protect those who have worked all their lives. In our manifesto, we promised to transfer the Investment Reserve Fund in the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to members. And I have listened closely to my honourable friends for Easington, Doncaster Central, Blaenau Gwent and Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on this issue. Today, we are keeping our promise, so that working people who powered our country receive the fair pension that they are owed. Our manifesto committed to the triple lock, meaning spending on the state pension is forecast to rise by over £31 billion by 2029-30, to ensure that our pensioners are protected in their retirement. This commitment means that while working age benefits will be uprated in line...
Yeah, I'll give you a new deal for working people.
...with CPI at 1.7%, the basic and new state pension will be uprated by 4.1% in 2025-26. This means that over 12 million pensioners will gain up to £470 next year, up to £275 more than if uprated by inflation. The pension credit standard minimum guarantee will also rise by 4.1%, from around £11,400 per year to around £11,850 a year for a single.
Okay, so that's going to wipe out all that you're taking away from the winter fuel payment then. Brilliant.
Pensioner. While I have sought to protect working people with measures to reduce the cost of living, I've had to take some very difficult decisions on tax. I want to set out my approach to fuel duty. Baked into the numbers that I inherited from the previous government is an assumption that fuel duty will rise by RPI next year, and that the temporary 5p cut will be reversed. To retain the 5p cut and to freeze fuel duty again would cost over £3 billion next year. At a time when the fiscal position is so difficult, I have to be frank with the House that this is a substantial commitment to make. I have concluded that in these difficult circumstances, while the cost of living remains high, and with a backdrop of global uncertainty, increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p per litre. So I have decided today to freeze fuel duty next year, and I will maintain the existing for another year.
Fuel duty increase. Get people out of their cars, Rachel. Because again, fuel duty being increased doesn't increase the price of fuel duty. It doesn't. Sorry, it doesn't increase the price of fuel, sorry. The price that you pay for fuel is set by supply and demand. It's as simple as that. It's always set by supply and demand, right? Dan Needle's done a really good thing on this. He pointed out that when there was a cut to fuel duty, fuel prices stayed the same. All that money was pocketed by the petrochemical industry. All that was pocketed by the petrochemical industry, because it meant that they got to sell it at the same price because people were still willing to pay that price, right? The supply-demand curve made it so that people were willing to pay that price that it was previously. But now they can still pay that price, but the companies can keep more profit. Yeah, you need to understand, it's really important to understand that the price point is at the intersection of the supply-demand curve. It is not, indeed, that plus however much you tax it. If you tax something, it will come out of profits.
Year two. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol pumps next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last government made cuts of £20 billion to employees and self-employed national insurance in their final two budgets. These tax cuts were.
The thing is that fuel duty, an increase in fuel duty would make loads of money for the exchequer if you can use it through like a household budget model. Like factors of 10 more than it costs for like the bus fare rise, which is like in the hundreds of millions rather than in the billions. Like, imagine doing this. Imagine freezing fuel duty and then also increasing the price of bus fares. Ridiculous.
Not honest. No. Because we now know that they were based on a forecast which the OBR say would have been materially different. It would have been materially different had they known the true extent of the last government's cover-up. Since July, I have been urged on multiple occasions to reconsider these cuts, to increase the taxes that working people pay and see in their payslips. But I have made an important choice today, to keep every single commitment that we made on tax in our manifesto. Yeah. So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance, I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. Yeah. Working people will not see higher taxes in their payslips as a result of the choices that I am making today. Yeah. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Yeah. But any responsible Chancellor would need to make difficult decisions today, to raise the revenues required to fund our public services and to restore economic stability. So in today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions.
Are we seeing it? Is there any good stuff about this? Are we taxing the rich or no? The rich will pay more tax after this budget because there is an increase in employers' national insurance contributions, which will affect every business owner who employs people, which of course, some big, some small. And it's reported there'll be an increase in capital gains tax, which mostly affects people who have assets, not those who earn. So that would obviously be a tax on the wealthier, right? Are we getting wealth taxes? Almost certainly not. Or a land value tax, likewise. Are we getting some taxes that go after the rich? Yes, just not enough.
We will increase the rate of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. And we will reduce the secondary threshold, the level at which employers start paying national insurance on each employee's salary, from £9,100 a year to £5,000. This will raise £25 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. I know that this is a difficult choice. I do not take this decision lightly. We are asking businesses to contribute more, and I know that there will be impacts of this measure felt beyond businesses too, as the
Wouldn't increasing employer national insurance make employing people more expensive? I mean, it would do, yes, but there is a certain level of productivity you need to ensure that you can create the commodities to bring to market. The cost of what it costs to hire somebody, again, the wage is set by supply and demand, and then the national insurance contribution on top is just something that you have to pay essentially as a surcharge on top of that. So it doesn't reduce how much you have to pay people based upon the supply and demand for that line of labour. It would come out of profits, most likely. Or there would be fewer people employed, I guess. But any money that is paid to the state in tax, they spend on employment in the public sector, is just shifting where the people are employed. It doesn't destroy jobs. It removes jobs around from private to public.
OBR has set out today. But in the circumstances...
Order, Chancellor! Order! Our constituents are watching. They need to be able to hear the Chancellor. Simmer down. Chancellor.
But in the circumstances that I have inherited, it is the right choice to make. Successful businesses depend on successful schools. Healthy businesses depend on a healthy NHS. And a strong economy depends on strong public finances. If the party opposite chooses to oppose this choice, then they are choosing more austerity, more chaos, more instability. This is the choice that our country faces.
Tory chaos. We knew she'd say it.
Too. As I make this choice, I know it is particularly important to protect our smallest companies. So, having heard representations from the Federation of Small Businesses and others, I am today increasing the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500. This means 865,000 employers won't pay any national insurance at all next year. And over 1 million will pay the same or less than...
Thank you, Journeying Jordan, for the Prime sub. Appreciate it. Remember, if you enjoy my meme coverage of the budget, right? If you're enjoying Budget Bingo, you can support the stream in plenty of different ways, as you have seen. You can subscribe on Twitch for $4.99 or for free with Twitch Prime by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account and get you a free subscription just like Journeying Jordan did every single month, courtesy of Jeff Bezos. So if you pay monthly for Amazon Prime, but you've not subscribed to me on Twitch, if you link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you can then subscribe to me for free. It costs you nothing. It gets you the benefits on Twitch, such as ad-free viewing, animated and static emotes in Twitch chat. It helps support me by giving me money, and it costs you literally nothing. You're just diverting money from Jeff Bezos to me through yourself, and you don't pay anything extra. So please, if you're watching on YouTube, jump over to twitch.tv/NoJusticeMTG, link Amazon Prime to Twitch, and give me your free money, and you get all of your subscription benefits. If you want a message read out, you can drop bits over on Twitch. That's 100 bits for text-to-speech. I've read out all messages who are on Super Chat on YouTube, regardless of value, as long as they're not rude. So if you want a message read out on YouTube, please Super Chat that message. There is also memberships on YouTube available. They're 99p. They're cheaper than a can of Red Stripe. To get you access to archive live streams and my static emotes in YouTube chat and in YouTube comments. And of course, if you do not want to super chat, you don't have a message to read out, but you do want to contribute, the best way to support the stream is to gift memberships in YouTube chat.
I'm literally a communist.
That spreads the love around and it helps boost the stream in the algorithm and gets loads more people access to all of the different benefits that you get for being a member. Again, it's cheaper than a can of Red Stripe to be a member on YouTube. It's just 99p.
Melon Marks as.
Thank you for the bits of Million Mage. Appreciate the support.
Than they did previously. This will allow a small business to employ the equivalent of 4 full-time workers on the national living wage without paying any national insurance on their wages. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now come to capital gains tax. We need to drive growth, promote entrepreneurship and support wealth creation, while raising the revenue required to fund our public services and restore our public finances. Today, we will increase the lower rate of capital gains tax from 10 to 18% and the higher rate from 20 to 24%, while maintaining the rates of capital gains tax on residential property at 18 and 24% too.
So they're not even they're not even equalising capital gains tax with income tax. That's really depressing, isn't it? That if you make your money from owning shit rather than from actually doing work, you're still going to pay less tax. Remember, over here in the Green Party, we want to equalise capital gains tax and income tax because it shouldn't matter whether or not that you make your money from working or owning. You should still pay tax. Ideally, if you're making money from owning rather than working, you should pay more tax, not less. But, you know, keeping them equal would be reasonable. And that's too far. That would be too far.
This means the UK will still have the lowest capital gains tax rate of any European G7 economy.
That's a bad thing, Rachel. That's not good. Having the lowest capital gains tax rate in fucking Europe is a bad thing.
Alongside these changes to the headline rates of capital gains tax, we are maintaining the lifetime limit for business asset disposal relief at £1 million to encourage entrepreneurs to invest in their businesses. Business asset disposal relief will remain at 10% this year before rising to 14% in April 2025 and to 18% from 2026-27, maintaining a significant gap compared to the higher rate of capital gains tax. Together, the OBR say that these measures will raise £2.5 billion by the end of the forecast.
It's nothing. Literally, it's just fucking nothing. £2.5 billion is nothing compared to the tens of billions you were going to get from the Greens for the equalisation.
In a sign of this government's commitment to supporting growth and entrepreneurship, we have already extended the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Venture Capital Trust schemes to 2035. And we will continue to work with leading entrepreneurs and venture capital firms to ensure that our policies support a positive environment for entrepreneurship in the UK. Next, inheritance tax. Only 6% of estates will pay inheritance tax this year. I understand the strongly held desire to pass down savings to children and grandchildren. So I am taking a balanced approach in my package today. First, the previous government froze inheritance tax thresholds until 2028. I will extend that freeze for a further 2 years until 2030. That means the first £325,000 of any estate can be inherited tax-free.
Oh, we're getting fiscal drag on inheritance tax. That's interesting. We already had fiscal drag on inheritance. We're increasing fiscal drag on inheritance tax.
Fucking neoliberalism.
Thank you for the 10 gifted card. I appreciate the support. I mean, if there's one kind of fiscal drag that I am accepting of, it's the fiscal drag on inheritance tax.
Rising to £500,000 if the estate includes a residence passed to direct descendants.
Well, what's interesting, though, is actually whilst I think that it's a good thing and more people are paying inheritance tax, it's actually really bad politically, right? It'd be much easier for them to raise the rate of inheritance tax on people who are on the higher echelons of earning, right? Or of passing down, I guess. Not that it's not earning, it's passing down money. But it's politically more difficult to drag more people into paying inheritance tax than it is to make the people who do pay it already pay more, right? Like, by affecting a larger portion of the population, you're therefore going to get more pushback, which is what the fiscal drag does, rather than just going, well, if you're passing down £10 million of assets, so you can pay a fuck ton of tax, which would be, I don't know whether you call it fairer, but it would be politically easier.
And £1 million when a tax-free allowance is passed to a surviving spouse or civil partner. Second, we will close the loophole created by the previous government, made even bigger when the lifetime allowance was abolished, by bringing inherited pensions into inheritance tax from April 2027. Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms and with three quarters of claims unaffected by these changes. I can also announce that we will apply a 50% in all circumstances.
It is funny just how rich farmers are. Like, farmers are obviously really important for our food supply, especially in a world in which these things are getting far more precarious, right? But I think we forget just how rich farmers are. Like they have like £1 million worth of estate, but you know, it's because land is expensive, right? Land is incredibly expensive. I mean, it's an asset that you're passing down. Someone's going to make a huge amount of money off of, but if they're going to continue to use it for generating food, right? You know, you want to keep these people on side. I understand the reason for doing it. Also, thank you, Kazaku and Ephidus, for the Prime subs. Appreciate it. Remember, if you've used Prime subs previously, you have to re-up it every single month.
circumstances on inheritance tax for shares on the alternative investment market and other similar markets, setting the effective rate of tax at 20%. Taken together, these measures raise over £2 billion by the final year of the forecast. Next, I can confirm that the Government will renew the tobacco duty escalator for the remainder of this Parliament at RPI plus 2%. Increase duty by a further 10% on hand-rolling tobacco this year.
Aren't farmers subsidised, though? I mean, the farmers are highly subsidised, yeah. But, you know, if you're going to put aside the amount of work and time and energy and effort it takes to be part of, like, a key part of our food production area, like, you know what? Fair play, you know. I'm not going to rag on farmers too much, given how important they are in the functioning of society, especially when, you know, where we would get imported food has become much harder. So I'm not going to rag on people for subsidising farmers too much at the end of the day. If we could convince more people to do it, it would make our food chain much easier.
Introduce a flat rate duty on all vaping liquids.
I mean, that is true, do you even have? The farm workers are important, people who own the farms aren't, and they're the rich ones. But from what I'm aware of, most farm owners also do a lot of work as well. But, you know, like, for the first time, I'm going to put pragmatism above ideology, right? To quote the Labour Party and say, you all know, at the end of the day, if we're getting large amounts of food going into our supply chains to bring down food prices and become more geopolitically stable so don't get hit like we did during the war in Ukraine with our food supply, you know what, then, you know, we can cut our losses.
From October 2026, alongside an additional one-off increase in tobacco duty to maintain the incentive to give up smoking. And we will increase the soft drinks industry levy to account for inflation since it was introduced, as well as increasing the duty in line with CPI each year going forward. These measures will raise nearly £1 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want to support the take-up of electric vehicles, so I will maintain the incentives for electric vehicles in company car tax from 2028 and increase the differential between fully electric and other vehicles in the first-year rates of vehicle excise duty from April 2025. These measures will raise around £400 million by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me update the House on our plans for air passenger duty. And I can see the right honourable gentleman's ears have picked up.
Love from Tokyo.
Air passenger duty.
Thank you, Younger Pac-Man.
Air passenger duty has not kept up with inflation in recent years, so we are introducing an adjustment, meaning an increase of no more than £2 for an economy-class short-haul flight. But I am taking a different approach when it comes to private jets.
Zach Polanski's ears have just pricked up. Zach Polanski have just gone and said, Zach Polanski's just gone on, just immediately jumped out of his chair when he heard the word private jets. Let's go.
Increasing the rate of air passenger duty by a further 50%. That is equivalent to £450 per passenger for a private jet to, say, California? Madam Deputy Speaker.
Okay, I'll give Rachel her dues there. That's a very funny joke. And it's a good policy.
Let us now turn to our high street businesses. I know for them, a major source of concern is business rates. From 2026-27, we intend to introduce 2 permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, which make up the backbone of our high streets across the country. And it is our intention that it is paid for by a higher multiplier for the most valuable properties. But the previous government created a cliff edge next year as temporary reliefs end. So I will today provide 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry in 2025-26, up to a cap of £110,000 per business. Alongside this, the small business tax multiplier will be frozen next year. Next, I can confirm that alcohol duty rates on non-draft products will increase in line with RPI from February next year. But nearly 2/3 of alcoholic drinks sold in pubs are served on draft. So today, instead of uprating these products in line with inflation, I am cutting draft duty by 1.7%.
They're absolutely. I agree. Actually, in chat, there should be a multiple flight levy, right?
Fucking
it should be
neoliberalism.
stratified based on how often that you continue to fly, so that you don't tax people who go on a couple of holidays a year, but you do tax people who spend the time fucking gallivanting around really a lot of the time as well. A lot of the time, it would just be a business tax anyway. Most people who frequently fly do it for business reasons, so... As mostly multi-million-pound international businesses, not local businesses.
Which means a penny off the pints in the pub. Alongside the changes I am making today, I am publishing a corporate tax roadmap, providing the business certainty called for by the CBI, the British Chambers of Commerce and the Institute for Directors. This confirms our commitment to cap the rate of corporation tax at 25%, the lowest in the G7, for the duration of this Parliament.
Like, the Chamber of Commerce are like the fucking worst people, because they are like fully a trade union, but for businesses, right? They are the business union, the Chamber of Commerce. People are scumbags.
While maintaining full expensing and the £1 million annual investment allowance, and keeping the current rates of research and development relief to drive innovation. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a number of commitments to raise funding for our public services. First, I have always said that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here too. So today, I can confirm we will abolish the non-dom tax regime. And we will remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025. We will introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive arrangements for those coming to the UK on a temporary basis, while closing the loopholes in the scheme designed by the party opposite. To further encourage investment into the UK, we will also extend the temporary repatriation relief to 3 years and expand its scope, bringing billions of pounds of new funds into Britain. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility say that this package of measures will raise £12.7 billion over the next 5 years. Next, the fund management industry provides a vital contribution to our economy. But as our manifesto set out, there needs to be a fairer approach to the way that carried interest is taxed. So we will increase the capital gains rates on carried interest to 32% from April 2025. And from April 2026, we will deliver further reform to ensure that the specific rules for carried interest are simpler, fairer and better targeted. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow. This will support over 130,000 additional transactions from people buying their first home or moving home over the next 5 years. Next, we are committed to reform the energy profits levy on oil and gas companies. I can confirm today that we will increase the rate of the levy to 38%, which will now expire in March 2030, and we will remove the 29% investment allowance.
Well, this is all in the manifesto, so it makes sense.
To ensure that the oil and gas industry can protect jobs and support our energy security. So we will maintain the 100% first-year allowances and the decarbonisation allowances too. Finally, 94% of children in the UK attend state schools. To provide the highest quality of support and teaching that they deserve, we will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. We said in our manifesto that these changes, alongside our measures to tackle tax avoidance, would bring in £8.5 billion in the final year of the forecast. I can confirm today that they will in fact raise over £9 billion. To support our public services and restore our public finances. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final decision to take on tax today. The previous government
just put up stamp duty on second homes to 20%, completely unjustified that second home purchasing is treated with kid gloves, and it should be massively disincentivised, right? People owning more houses than they need is like the worst thing that we have in our housing crisis at the moment, as well as a lack of supply and the sell-off of council housing.
Those income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I'm keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there will be no extension of the the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028 to 29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again.
Okay, so it turns out that she is, after all of the criticism, actually sticking to the manifesto pledge. After all of the speculation, there will be a further extension of fiscal drag. That's now not happening. Well, there you go.
When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the choices I have made: to restore economic stability and to protect working people. The next choice I make is to begin to repair our public services. In recent months, we have conducted the first phase of the spending review to set departmental budgets for 2024-25 and 2025-26. And I want to thank my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, for his tireless work with colleagues from across government. Because I have taken difficult decisions on tax today, I am able to provide an injection of immediate funding over the next 2 years to stabilise and to support our public services. The next phase of the spending review will report in late spring, and I have set the overall envelope today. Day-to-day spending from 2024-25 onwards will grow by 1.5% in real terms. And today, departmental spending, including capital spending, will grow by 1.7% in real terms. At the election, we promised there would be no return to austerity. Today, we deliver on that promise.
You're projecting to go into a budget surplus. You're massively reducing the deficit. I mean, is it every single budget that's going into... Is every single department raising by 1%, or is it just protected departments?
But given the scale of the challenge that we are facing in our public services, that means there will still be...
There's like loads of cuts in things like... Yeah, exactly. Loads of cuts in welfare.
...difficult choices in the next phase of the spending review. Just as we cannot tax and spend our way to prosperity, nor can we simply spend our way to better public services.
Yes, we absolutely can do both of those things. Stop just repeating untrue right-wing canards as if they're fact. We absolutely can tax and spend our way to prosperity, and we absolutely can spend our way to better public services. We can literally do both of these things.
So we will deliver a new approach to public service reform, using technology to improve public services, and taking a zero-based approach, so that taxpayers' money is spent as effectively as possible, and so we focus on delivering our key priorities. In the first phase of the spending review, I have prioritised day-to-day funding to deliver on our manifesto commitments. I want every child to have the very best start in life, and the best possible start to the school day too. And I know my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, shares my ambition. So I am today tripling investment in breakfast clubs to fund them in thousands of schools. I am increasing...
Only thousands of schools? Only I thought we were doing free breakfast clubs in every school. Now, the utility of this policy is quite high. The studies have shown that it's really good for increasing educational attainment, but surely you'd want them in every school.
The core schools budget by £2.3 billion next year to support our pledge to hire thousands more teachers into key subjects. So that our young people can develop the skills that they need for the future, I am providing an additional £300 million for further education. And finally, this government is committed to reforming special educational needs provision, to improve outcomes for our most vulnerable children and to ensure that the system is financially sustainable. To support that work, I am today providing a
I can tell your Scottish idiosyncrasy.
£1 billion uplift in funding, a 6% real terms increase from this year. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe, and we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year. And as set out in our manifesto, we will set a path to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence at a future fiscal event. Today, I am announcing a total increase to the Ministry of Defence's budget of £2.9 billion next year.
Why? Why are we wasting this money?
Ensuring that the UK comfortably exceeds our NATO commitments, and providing guaranteed military support to Ukraine of £3 billion per year for as long as it takes. Last week, alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary,
As someone who worked in a school, breakfast clubs weren't used nearly enough as early morning, especially difficult for SEND kids and poorer families. Free school lunches for more kids would be ideal too, or better accommodation for later breakfast. I mean, I support both. I support free breakfast clubs and I support free school meals. Both of them are policies where you get higher returns than state spending overall. Like, it's a holistically net positive for the Exchequer as a policy.
I announced in addition to this further support to Ukraine on top of our NATO commitment through our £2.26 billion contribution to the G7's extraordinary revenue.
Like, that projected increase in the Ministry of Defence's budget is like double what it would cost to get rid of the two-child benefit cap.
New acceleration agreement, repaid.
Or double what it would cost to get rid of... You could get rid of the two-child benefit cap and stop not means test the winter fuel payment for the amount that they're adding to the military budget.
Profits from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. And as we approach Remembrance Sunday, it is vital that we take time to remember those who have served our country so bravely. So I am today announcing funding to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ.
The thing is, Noblini, is that the Trump rhetoric around NATO spending was that there was like Baltic states, and a bunch of other like Central European states didn't hit the 2%. Like, we already exceed the 2% NATO spending on our military. So like the Trump like NATO kind of saber rattling doesn't really apply to us.
Day next year to honour those who have served at home and abroad. We must also remember those who experienced the atrocities of the Nazi regime firsthand. I would like to pay tribute to Lily Ebert, the Holocaust survivor and educator who passed away aged 100 earlier this month. I am today committing a further £2 million to Holocaust education next year, so that charities like the Holocaust Educational Trust can continue their work to ensure that these vital testimonies are not lost and are preserved for the future.
It would be really, the things that would be a really good thing if I trusted the people at the HET to not just be incredibly pro-Israel hawks, because the person at the moment, is it Karen Pollock is the one? Or is she from a different place? Yeah, no, it's Karen Pollock. Is literally the one who just literally spouts pro-Israel propaganda. It's so depressing. Such an important thing, which should be absolutely have extra funding being put into it. I agree. Holocaust education is really important. We should be prioritizing in our education system. The fact that the people who she's entrusting to do it are using the money that should be being done to teach a really important part of history and then using it as their positions to essentially just lie about the state of Israel, it's really fucking depressing. It's really depressing. Really sad.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to repair our public services, we also need to work alongside our mayors and local leaders. We will deliver a significant real terms funding increase for local governments next year, including £1.3 billion of additional grant funding to deliver essential services, with at least £600 million in grant funding for social care, and £230 million to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. We are today confirming that Greater Manchester and the West Midlands will be the first mayoral authorities to receive integrated settlements from next year, giving mayors meaningful control of the funding for their local areas. And to support our high streets, we are taking action to deal with the sharp rise in shoplifting that we have seen in recent years. We will scrap the effective immunity for low-value shoplifting introduced by the party opposites.
And that's also true, Eric. I do believe that we should be having broader, like, genocide education, right? Like, how many people do you think in our education system know about what happened in the Belgian Congo? Or what happened in Uganda? Or what happened in Timor-Leste? You know, or in Bangladesh? Like, they don't like to teach us about the genocides in Bangladesh and in East Timor, because we were complicit in the genocides in Bangladesh, and explicitly so, the genocide in East Timor. Like, we were still selling Indonesia weapons whilst they were occupying East Timor.
And having listened closely to organisations like the British Retail Consortium and the trade union USDOR, I am providing additional funding to crack down on the organised gangs which target retailers, and to provide more training to our police officers and retailers to stop shoplifting in its tracks. Finally, I am today providing funding to support...
According to Lammy, they weren't genocides because millions weren't killed. Just how insane David Lammy's statement was, right? It's just how insane David Lammy's statement was because... He's sort of about the scale, the number of people who die. How many, like, the only official part of the Yugoslav wars that was deemed a genocide was Srebrenica. And, like, in Bosnia, like, that very specific massacre was, you know, wasn't millions of people, yet it is still correctly classed as a genocide. Like, again, Bad Empanada's video pointed this out on this by saying, well, actually, you know, in most places in the Yugoslav wars in Bosnia, where genocidal acts were committed, they weren't deemed a genocide, even though they were done under the explicit same pretenses as what happened in Srebrenica. But because of the specific nature of how it happened in Srebrenica, it was specifically called one, even though it clearly was, right? Like, so much more of what happens during the Yugoslav wars in Bosnia can be counted as genocidal, but officially, the Bosnian genocide only happened in that one city, that one time.
Public services and drive growth across Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Having discussed the matter with the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, and my honourable friends for Llanelli and Pontypridd, I am today providing £25 million to the Welsh Government next year.
Well, there's the Bengal famine, Doggo Duck, and there's the Bangladesh genocide. Like, the Bengal famine was caused by the colonial British, but the Bangladeshi genocide was carried out by Pakistan in when Bangladesh were wanting independence, and it was militarily backed by Western states, right? In fact, look, Henry Kissinger was explicit in saying that it was worth funding the genocide to keep Pakistan on side, because Kissinger is, you know, a monster.
For the maintenance of coal tips, to ensure that we keep our communities safe. And to support growth, including in our rural areas, we will proceed with city and growth deals in Northern Ireland, in Causeway Coast and Glens, and the Mid-South West. And we will drive growth in Scotland, a key priority for Scottish Labour and our leader, Anna Sawar, including with a city and growth deal in Argyll and Bute. This budget provides the devolved governments with the largest real terms funding settlements since devolution, delivering an additional £3.4 billion.
Thank you for the gift, Nick.
Pounds to the Scottish Government through the Barnett
Fucking
formula.
neoliberalism.
Funding which must now be used effectively in Scotland to deliver the public services that the people of Scotland deserve. This budget also provides £1.7 billion to the Welsh Government and £1.5 billion to the Northern Ireland Executive in 2025-26. I said that there would be no return to austerity, and that is the choice that I have made today.
I'm literally trying to cover for Anna Sawar saying, read my lips, no return to austerity during the election campaign.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to rebuild our country, we need to increase investment. The UK lags behind every other G7 country when it comes to business investment as a share of our economy. That matters. It means the UK has fallen behind in the race for new jobs, new industries and new technology. By restoring economic stability and by establishing the National Wealth Fund to catalyse private funding, we have begun to create the conditions that businesses need to invest. But there is also a significant role for public investment. For too long, we have seen Conservative chancellors cut investment and raid capital budgets to plug gaps in day-to-day spending. The result is clear for all to see. Hospitals without the equipment they need. School buildings not fit for our children. A desperate lack of affordable housing. Economic growth held back at every turn. Under the plans I inherited, public investment was set to fall from 2.5% to 1.7% of GDP. But in Washington last week, the International Monetary Fund were clear. More public investment is badly needed in the UK.
The woke IMF, the lefty woke IMF wanting public spending.
So having listened to the case made by the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, former Treasury Minister Jim O'Neill, and the former Cabinet Secretary...
I mean, the more leaks we got from the budget, Ruben, the less bad that it seemed. It's not as bad as I expected. Probably just because of so much of the pushback, right? You know, any amount of leaking that even suggested there might be any kind of, you know, big scale cuts. Like, the worst part of all of this, of course, there's the bus fare and the winter fuel payment. The worst part of all of this is the way in which they're talking about, like, welfare, because we know this is very specific Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall bugbear. But I think this is what happens when this is why we've got to be super clear and super vocal in our opposition to this shit. That whenever the government does something that could be detrimental for a vulnerable group in society, whether it be the poor or whether it be the disadvantaged or the disabled or whatever, if we kick up a fuss and it becomes the national zeitgeist, the Labour Party can be forced into changing tack, which I think has been shown here. Like, there's so much was said of the potential for an austerity budget. They've essentially had to manoeuvre themselves into making sure they literally do not have any amount of overall spending reductions. But even then, they're still doing overall spending reductions in welfare when they wouldn't need to if they were just equalising capital gains with income tax.
Gus O'Donnell, among others, I am confirming our investment rule. As set out in our manifesto, we will target debt falling as a share of the economy. Debt will be defined as public sector net financial liabilities, or net financial debt for short, a metric that has been measured by the Office for National Statistics since 2016 and forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility since that date too. Net financial debt recognises that government investment delivers returns.
This is why media matters. Exactly. This is why constant coverage and constant and ensuring that we critique the government when they say they're going to do bad things, and we push back hard and make it part of the zeitgeist to get them to change course.
For taxpayers. By counting not just the liabilities on a government's balance sheet, but the financial assets too. This means that we count the benefits of that investment, not just the costs. And we free up our institutions to invest, just as they do in Germany, France and Japan. Like our stability rule, our investment rule will apply in 2029-2030, until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From that point onwards, net financial debt will fall in the third year of every forecast. Today, the OBR say that we are already meeting our target 2 years early, with net financial debt falling by 2027-28, with £15.7 billion of headroom in the final year. So that we drive the right incentives in government investments, we will introduce 4 key guardrails that ensure capital spending is good value for money and drives growth in our economy.
This is good, right? So investment won't count as debt. Yeah, so I did a whole bit on it on Novara last week, right? So the biggest thing out of this, so it means that they can invest in company equity and financial instruments without it counting as real debt or increasing the overall debt burden, for example. Obviously, the debt will still be there, but the amount in which it counts towards the government's balance sheet is counted correctly. But that only counts to financial investments, right? So if you build a hospital or a school or a road or, you know, that doesn't count. That would still be debt and wouldn't have anything on the other side of the balance sheet. But it means if they, you know, bought shares in a company and that company then returned money to the exchequer in the form of dividends or increased value, increased share price, then that would not count towards the overall level of debt because it would be an investment in a financial resource that's generating value for the exchequer, right? So that's a good change. What it also does is it means that the opposite is also true. If you sell off a financial instrument, if you sell off an equity stake in a company that is owned by the state, you can't put it into your profit for the government. You can't use it to pad your future budgets, because it means that you would instantly lose all that money off of any particular cuts to debt you otherwise would be having, because you would no longer have the asset. So remember when last year, it was, or 2 years ago, the Conservative government sold off the last of our shares in Royal Bank of Scotland, and it showed in having reduced the deficit? You wouldn't be able to do that under the new fiscal rule, because as an equity stake in a company, it would have value on both sides of the ledger.
First, our portfolio of new financial investments will be delivered by expert bodies like the National Wealth Fund, which must by default earn a rate of return at least as large as that on gilts. Second, we will strengthen the role of institutions to improve infrastructure delivery. Third, we will improve certainty, setting capital budgets for 5 years and extending them at every spending review every 2 years. Finally, we will ensure that there is greater transparency for capital spending, with robust annual reporting of financial investments based on accounts audited by the National Audit Office and made available to the Office for Budget.
So what if we own a nuclear reactor that was valued at X amount? Does that count as an asset? No, because it's a physical asset and not a financialised one. But the difference is, Kazaku, is that if we owned, you know, a certain number of shares in a private nuclear company, that would count as an asset, right? So owning the actual physical asset state-owned doesn't come off the budget. But what does come off the budget is if we own shares in a company that does the same thing, right? Which I think is a meaningless distinction. And also, it pushes the idea of public-private partnerships over just state ownership, which I also dislike. We should use with a more radical term, quote-unquote, that the Guardian were describing, which is public sector net debt, which is any asset the government owns gets taken off the figures.
Responsibility at every forecast. Taken together with our stability rule, these fiscal rules will ensure that our public finances are on a firm footing while enabling us to invest prudently alongside business. The capital plans that I now set out to drive growth across our country and repair the fabric.
That's why she says alongside business, right? She's saying alongside business because that's what the new change to the debt measurement means. You have to get the equity stake in the company or financialise the asset rather than have the actual brick and mortar assets itself state-owned, right? It's weird that it prioritises business partnerships and public-private partnerships rather than, you know, full-on state ownership. And also I'm going to put that down as partner with business. It's fine. It's fine. Like, it's better than what we had before.
Fabric of our nation are only possible because of our investment rule. Let me set out those investment plans. Today, we are confirming our plans to capitalise the National Wealth Fund to invest in the industries of the future, from gigafactories to ports to green hydrogen. Building on these investments, my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is driving forward our modern industrial strategy. Yeah. Working with businesses and organisations like Make UK to set out the sectors with the biggest growth potential. Today, we are confirming multi-year funding commitments for these areas of our economy, including nearly £1 billion for the aerospace sector to fund vital research and development, building on our industry in the East Midlands, the South West and in Scotland. Over £2 billion for the automotive sector to support our electric vehicle industry and develop our manufacturing base, building on our strengths in the North East and the West Midlands. And up to £520 million for a new life sciences innovative manufacturing fund. For our world-leading creative industries, we will legislate to provide additional tax relief for visual effect costs in TV and film. And we are providing £25 million for the North East Combined Authority, which they plan to use to remediate the Crownworks studio site in Sunderland, creating 8,000 new jobs. To unlock these growth industries of the future, we will protect government investment in research and development with more than £20 billion worth of funding. This includes at least £6.1 billion to protect core research funding for areas like engineering, biotechnology and medical science. Yeah. Through Research England, other research councils and the national academies. We will extend the Innovation Accelerators programme in Glasgow, in Manchester and in the West Midlands. Yeah. And with over £500 million of funding next year, my right honourable friend, the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretary, will continue to drive progress in improving reliable, fast broadband and mobile coverage across our country, including in rural areas. Yeah.
Oh no, but no broadband communism though, eh? No return to broadband communism, sad face.
We committed in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is driving that work forward across government. Today, I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year. Yeah. We will increase the Affordable Homes programme to £3.1 billion, delivering thousands of new homes. Yeah. We will provide £3 billion worth of support in guarantees to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders. Yeah. And we will provide...
Come on, supporting small house builders? What's a small house builder? You know, how about, local authorities?
Investment to renovate sites across our country, including at Liverpool Central Docks, where we will deliver 2,000 new homes, and funding to help Cambridge realise its full growth potential. Yeah. Alongside this investment, we will put the right policies in place to increase the supply of affordable housing. Yeah. Having heard representations from local authorities, social housing providers and from Shelter, I can today confirm that the government will reduce right-to-buy discounts and local authorities will be able to retain the full receipts from any sales of social housing so that we can reinvest them back into the housing stock and into new...
Just get rid of it. I mean, again, this is fine. Like, I'm not saying any amount of reform to right to buy that isn't abolishing it is bad. Like that's fine. Like, that's fine to do, but...
Supply. By doing this, we will give more people a safe, secure and affordable place to live. Yeah. We will provide stability to social housing providers with a social housing rent settlement of CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to hire hundreds of new planning officers to get Britain building again. We will also make progress on our
They're reducing the right to buy discount Viking Nephilim.
commitment to accelerate the remediation of homes following the findings of the Grenfell inquiry, with £1 billion of investment to remove dangerous cladding next year. The last government made a number of promises on transport, but it failed to fund them.
So was the leak about 500 million for social housing, for council housing, was that not true? Because she said she was putting £3 billion into trying to drive an increase in social housing and affordable house building, right? They said they were providing £3 billion for this. So is there actually no state investment for council housing, or is this £3 billion for social housing and affordable housing? Is this actually going into council housing or not? It's unclear.
Working with my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, I am changing that. We are today securing the delivery of the Trans-Pennine upgrade to connect York, Leeds, Huddersfield and Manchester. Delivering fully electric local and regional services between Manchester and Staley Bridge by the end of this year. With a further electrification of services between...
So 5 billion overall, 500 million for social housing, 1.5 for new towns and 3 billion for small businesses. That should be the other way around, really, shouldn't it?
In Church Fenton and York by 2026 to help grow our economy across the north of England with faster and more reliable services. We will deliver East-West Rail to drive growth between Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge, with the first services running between Oxford, Bletchley and Milton Keynes next year, and trains between Oxford and Bedford running from 2030. We are delivering railway schemes which improve journeys for people across our country, including upgrades at Bradford Forster Square station, improving capacity at Manchester Victoria and electrifying the Wigan to Bolton line. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, has also set out a plan for how to get a grip of HS2. Today, we are securing delivery of the project between Old Oak Common and Birmingham, and we are committing the funding required to begin tunnelling work.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with being a communist slut. I am both of those things.
The London Euston Station. This will catalyse private investment into the local area, delivering jobs and growth. I am also funding significant improvements to our roads network. For too long, potholes have been an all too visible reminder of our failure to invest as a nation. Today, that changes. With £500 million increase in road maintenance budgets next year, more than delivering on our manifesto commitment to fix an additional 1 million potholes each year. We will provide over £650 million of local transport funding to improve connections across our country, in towns like Crewe and Grimsby, and in our villages and rural areas from Cornwall to Cumbria. And while the previous government's policy was for the bus fare cap to end this December, we understand how important bus services are for our communities. And so we will extend the cap for a further year, setting it at £3 until December 2025.
And again, what are they saving? But it will cost like, I think it was extra 350 million. I think was to keep it at 2 rather than 3, right? They just couldn't find that. And it's going to have a really, again, it's just so optically terrible. I did a whole segment about it.
Finally, we will deliver £1.3 billion of funding to improve connectivity in our city regions, funding projects like the Brierley Hill Metro extension in the West Midlands, the renewal of Sheffield Supertram, and the West Yorkshire Mass Transit, including in Bradford and Leeds. Madam Deputy Speaker.
And also what's frustrating is the fact that, I mean, it's funny actually, it's funny that Andy Burnham is keeping the £2 bus fare cap. He has the power. He has the power as a devolved mayor to be able to do that. I just think it's quite funny that he's still doing it, but not happening everywhere else.
Bring new jobs to Britain and to drive growth across our country. We are delivering our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, led by my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary. Earlier this month, we announced a significant multi-year investment between government and business into carbon capture and storage, creating 4,000 jobs across Merseyside and Teesside. Today, I am providing funding for 11 new green hydrogen projects across England, Scotland and Wales. They will be amongst the first commercial-scale projects anywhere in the world, including in Bridgend, East Renfrewshire and Barrow-in-Furness. We are kick-starting the Warm Homes Plan.
Yes, because the B network is publicly owned. Funny how that works so well. It's funny, isn't it? Exactly. Like, we get fare caps on the B network and in TfL, right? These publicly owned networks. But all these private providers are going to try and push up to £3. Weird, that, isn't it? OBR report shows departments facing day-to-day spending cuts. The Home Office, the Cabinet Office, Culture, Media and Sport, DEFRA, Transport and Intelligence Services. Fewer departments than I expected. Local government not facing cuts as feared, in fact getting 10% increases. I mean, that'll go some way to remunerating them for the 40% cuts they've had in the last 15 years.
By confirming an initial £3.4 billion over the next 3 years to transform 350,000 homes, including 250,000 low-income and social homes. And we will establish GB Energy, providing funding next year to set up GB Energy.
What are they doing with the hydrogen? It's needed in manufacturing, not the gas network or transport. They're trying to do fucking hydrogen buses. So, like, the hydrogen bus stuff, it's actually a Boris Johnson plan. Like, he knew a bus manufacturer in Northern Ireland, right? His mate ran it. So he did this state scheme to put funding into this Northern Ireland bus builder to make them do hydrogen buses, and then was going to import blue hydrogen from Australia to fund it, to, like, have green credentials, but, like, the worst way possible. Honestly, I don't even think we need, like, hydrogen buses. What we actually need, we can keep diesel buses. Diesel buses are absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with diesel buses. We just need more of them, and they need to be cheaper, and we need to get people out of their petrol cars and into diesel buses. Like, that would be fine in massively reducing our overall carbon footprint.
At its new home in Aberdeen. Overall, we will invest an additional £100 billion over the next 5 years in capital spending, only possible because of our investment rule. The OBR say today that this investment will drive growth across our country in the next 5 years, and in the longer term, increase GDP by up to 1.4%. It will crowd in private investment, meaning more jobs and more opportunities in every corner of the UK. That is the choice that I have made, to invest in our country and to grow our economy. Today, I am setting out 2 final areas in which investment is so badly needed, to repair the fabric of our nation. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, the member for Lewisham West and East Dulwich, and I joined the Labour Party.
Breathing diesel emissions isn't the best. I mean, it's not. I agree, breathing in diesel emissions isn't the best, Callum. But you're going to have far less emissions in your cities if people are getting one bus rather than 15, 20 cars, right?
Because of the condition of our schools in the 1980s and the 1990s. Under Conservative.
True, also building more trams and light rail will also be based as fuck. And getting trams subsidised like the buses are. You know, the trams in Nottingham, I never use the tram. I never ever get the tram in Nottingham because it's just too expensive. Like, it's £5.50 for a return, which is more expensive than the bus with the fare cap. Although maybe I'll get the tram more often if the price for the bus fare is going up. But anyway, regardless, you know, the tram is just more expensive than the bus, so I never get it. So if we had tram fares nationally owned and cheaper, like we're getting in the ways in which Andy Burnham can keep the bus fares low in Manchester, then I would get the tram. More people could get the tram if we had more investment in it. And the tram in Manchester was great too. I hope that with the metro in Manchester being folded into the B network, that can get some cost reductions as well.
Governments. When we were at secondary school, my sixth form was a couple of prefab huts in the playground. My school, like so many others, was rebuilt by the last Labour government. But today, after 14 years of Tory government, progress has gone backwards. School roofs.
Hydrogen buses in the West Midlands have been a huge white elephant due to hydrogen supply issues. Yeah, we literally import hydrogen from fucking Australia. We have to import our green, quote-unquote, hydrogen. It's really blue hydrogen, but green hydrogen across the fucking Pacific. So stupid.
Roofs are crumbling and millions of children are facing the same backdrop as I did. I will be the Chancellor that changes that. So today, I am providing £6.7 billion of capital investment to the Department for Education next year, a 19% real terms increase on this year. That includes £1.4 billion to rebuild over 500 schools in the greatest need, including St Helens Primary School in Hartlepool and Mercia Academy in Derby, and so many more across our country. And we will provide £2.1 billion more to improve school maintenance.
And we should just get ourselves the Barn Card 1000, right? We should be able to do what the Germans do and allow you to just buy like a fucking year-long ticket that gets you infinite public transport.
£300 million more than this year, ensuring that all our children can learn somewhere safe, including dealing with RAC-affected schools.
Having like easier like week, month and year-long passes, again, it's more induced demand, right? If you've paid up front for a huge amount of public transport, right, you're going to use your ticket that you've bought already to maximise how much you actually get out, how many journeys, individual journeys you get out of your initial investment, right? If you've already paid for your year-long train or bus or tram ticket or an integrated ticket, if we had integrated public transport, why the hell would you ever drive your car when you could take public transport when you've already paid for the ticket already, right? It's an easy way to be able to induce demand in public transport. Have I used German public transport? Not in the last 20 years, unfortunately.
In the constituencies of my right honourable friends for Watford, Stourbridge, Hyndburn and beyond. Alongside investment in new teachers and funding through thousands of new breakfast clubs, this government is giving our children and young people the opportunities that they deserve. Madam Deputy Speaker, I come to our most cherished public service of all, our NHS. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is beginning to repair the damage of the last 14 years. In our first week in office, he commissioned an independent report into the state of our health service by Lord Darcy. Its conclusions were damning. While our NHS staff do a remarkable job, and we thank them for it, it is clear that in so many areas, they're moving in the wrong direction. 100,000 infants waited over 6 hours in A&E last year. 350,000 people are waiting a year for mental health support. Cancer deaths here higher than in other countries. It is simply unforgivable.
The reason Germany has such good policy is because their business class is much more social democratic. They want students to keep their public transport passes to keep them in cities, apparently. It makes sense.
In the spring, we will publish a 10-year plan for the NHS to deliver a shift.
Have you seen what Portugal are doing? €20 a month train ticket for nearly all urban, regional, and interregional intercity services operated by their state-owned rail company. What an incredible idea that potentially literally any other country could do. If only Germany hadn't been Merkel, yeah, quite so.
From hospital.
Don't let Gerhard Schröder get off the hook as well, right? Just completely nerfing the idea of a left-wing opposition.
To community, from analogue to digital, and from sickness to prevention. Today, we are announcing a down payment on that plan to enable the NHS to deliver 2% productivity growth next year. These reforms are vital, but we should be honest. The state of the NHS that we have inherited after, and I quote Lord Darcy, the most austere decade since the NHS was founded, means that reform must come alongside investments. So today, because of the difficult decisions that I have taken on tax, welfare and spending, I can announce that I am providing a 22.6...
Also, you got to blame the German Greens for that. You really do have to blame the German Greens for the selling off of the nuclear and relying on fucking Rosneft and Gazprom.
£6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget. And a £3.1 billion increase in the capital budget over this year and next. This is the largest real terms growth in day-to-day NHS spending outside of COVID since 2010. Let me set out what this funding is delivering. Many NHS buildings have been left in a state of disrepair. So we will provide £1 billion of health capital investment next year to address the backlog of repairs and upgrades across our NHS. To increase capacity for tens of thousands more procedures next year, we will provide a further £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals across our country, new capacity for over 1 million additional diagnostic tests, and new surgical hubs and...
Yeah, literally, coming to, I'm like, the German Greens are every single, like, bad stereotype people have of Green parties, right? Just essentially being anti-growth, not even like degrowthers, but just like anti-growth policy, just trying to, meddle in people's lives by getting rid of things they like rather than giving them alternatives. Just the absolute kind of worst stereotypes that you would usually get of a Green Party that luckily ours doesn't have as much of a problem with. Just honestly cannot stand the German Greens.
Diagnostic centres, so that people waiting for their treatment can get it.
And of course, very pro-Israel, right? There's a reason why whenever we talk about Green parties, whenever I compare Green parties, the two that I usually have really high up are the Australian Greens and the UK Greens. I always prefer the Australian Greens to the UK Greens, but maybe it's just Max Chandler Mather is such a Chad, such a giga Chad.
Quickly as possible. My Right Honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out further details of his review into the new hospital programme in the coming weeks and publishing in the new year. But I can tell the House today that work will continue at pace to deliver those 7 hospitals affected by the RAC crisis, including West Suffolk Hospital in Bury St Edmunds and Leighton Hospital in Crewe. And finally, because of this record injection of funding, because of the thousands of additional beds that we have secured, and because of the reforms that we are delivering in our NHS, we can now begin to bring waiting lists down more quickly and move towards our target for waiting times to be no longer than 18 weeks. By delivering on our...
These are literally just new Darzi super clinics, which they're going to rent from private equity and then lease to private equity to run. It's so fucking bad. Of course it is. I'm not surprised. Well, thank you, Wes Streeting. Appreciate Wes ruining policy for everybody.
Manifesto commitment for 40,000 extra hospital appointments a week. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, the choices I have made today are the right choices for our country. To restore stability to our public finances, to protect working people, to fix our NHS, and to rebuild Britain. That doesn't mean these choices are easy, but they are responsible. If the party opposite disagrees with the choices that I have made, then they must answer. What choices would they make? Would they again choose the path of irresponsibility, the path taken by Liz Truss, and ignore the problems in our public finances altogether? If that is their choice, they should say so. But let me be clear. If they disagree with my choices on tax, then they would not be able to protect working people. If they disagree with our plans to fund public services, then they would have to cut schools and hospitals. And if they disagree with our investment rule, then they would have to delay or cancel thousands of projects which drive growth across our country. This is a moment of fundamental choice for Britain. I have made my choices, the responsible choices, to restore stability to our country, to protect working people.
Yours really stupid, Ralph. See, I know people who are watching ahead will know that Rishi Sunak's doing his response because we're about half an hour behind from all of the pausing and talking I've done. I'll probably react to Rishi Sunak later on tonight. It's funny that they didn't choose their leader before the budget, so now Rishi Sunak is going to answer in a way that's not going to be consistent with whatever direction the party takes under Badenoch or Jenrick.
More teachers in our schools, more appointments in our NHS, more homes being built, fixing the foundations of our economy, investing in our future, delivering change, rebuilding Britain. We, on these benches, commend those choices, and I commend this statement to the House.
He just spends 15 minutes calling them liars and fiddlers. Well, I'm not surprised, right? What a surprise that Rishi Sunak doesn't really have anything positive to add. Now, I have some engagements during the day today, so I'm going to finish the stream for now. We'll do some more in-depth looking into the budget later on today. Oh, you're true. A massive lurch to the right, of course, yeah. Unless it's Jenrick, he might do the bait and switch like Starmer did. So, we'll see. We'll see. I'll be on Normal Island this evening with Callum, talking over the budget. I might stream again in the evening, so on at 7:30 I'll be with Callum and Normal Island over on the Turn Left channel at 7:30 till about 8:30. I'll probably do another stream at 9 p.m. this evening to be able to do more budget response. But I've got some stuff to do during the day because, of course, it's not often I do an early stream. If you're a new viewer and you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing on YouTube. It's free, or following on Twitch, also free to do. That helps you get updates on when I release videos, especially if you click the bell over on YouTube too. I still don't get a bingo, which is sad. But if you're enjoying this, please remember you can also contribute by becoming a member on YouTube for 99p, subscriber on Twitch for $4.99, or a supporter on Patreon for just £2 per month to help support me and keep me making content, because I do this 6 days a week, and I'm doing multiple streams today, 2 on my end and also 1 on the Turn Left channel too. So I put a lot of work into my content. If you can support that financially, if you can afford to, will always be appreciated. Thank you very much for everybody's support. I will raid out right now. YouTube viewers, I'm going to put you into the waiting room for tonight's Normal Island. I did get a diagonal bingo. I'll take a diagonal bingo. Yeah. I'll be back later on tonight. Where am I going to put the Twitch viewers into? Where am I going to raid into over on Twitch? There's Zach app over on Twitch. I guess I'll throw you over there. Take care, stay safe. See you tonight. Free Palestine. All that malarkey. Enjoy Zach app, the Australian lefty content creator. Go spam the Corbyn emote. Go spam the Corbyn emote. Do it. Take care, stay safe.